Hello, folks. Welcome to the season finale of the Wearable Takeover podcast. I am your host, Lakeisha Greenway, also known as Coach L. Now, folks, let me just tell you something. We've been introducing some of the top talent within tech and, of course, within the wearable tech ecosystem. And these are people that I don't want you to just think that they're just anybody, right? They are somebody, but these are also icons in the making that are going to change the way that you live every single day. They've been dropping gems, they've been sharing money moves, and folks, let me just tell you, they have been inviting you into their journey, but it's up to you to take a front seat. And how can you do that? All you have to do is go back, listen to the episode, make sure you rank it, and then reach out to these folks because there are so many opportunities available. And you want to make sure that you can say, hey, I knew them when I first heard them on the Wearable Takeover podcast, because I can promise you they are going to be household names. And in part because of our major guest here today, who is a media maven that is from Baltimore, but she is amazing at amplifying stories, but also creating opportunities and helping to diversify some of the major news networks, the stories that they tell every single day. And I'm so excited to have Miss Crystal Berger with us here today. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Crystal before we dig into this, folks, because I know that some of you may have your favorite media personalities that you may watch on primetime news or on some of those other network programs. And, they're all so polished and in front of the camera. But not only is she polished in front of the camera, but she's polished behind the camera. And she's going to share with us how she's been changing the game with all that she's been doing, as well as building a tech platform to amplify our stories. So Crystal Berger, originally from Baltimore, Maryland, who just returned from New York City, the Big Apple, she is the founder of EBO. She's also a contributor and speaker at the intersection of business, culture, and politics. All those things that we work around while we're building these tech platforms and ecosystems. And what she does is she uses emerging tech to break barriers to entry in media and corporate America. Now, if you think about this, I grew up in the age where we were talking about breaking glass ceilings, and more so that was associated with salaries. But now we're in a stage in the age where we're breaking glass ceilings in terms of roles and positions and fundraising and all of that. And so Crystal's right at the heart of that. And not only can you hear her story today on the Wearable Takeover podcast, but you can also watch her as she is the host of Tech Takeover on Fox Lifestyle. Now, folks, she has been featured on Fox News, ABC, Sirius XM, Black Enterprise. If you know me, I've been reading that since I was 16, as well as iHeartRadio, Business Insider, and Forbes. Now, she used to be, they say previously, a senior booking producer and national features host on Fox News Channel. That's a big deal now. And Crystal tripled network bookings, increasing diversity by 85% while she was overseeing affiliate relations for 1,300 local stations nationwide. Folks, I want you to get up on your feet wherever you are, okay? Because we are introducing to you an icon, the one and the only Crystal Berger. Welcome, Crystal.
Thank you, Lakeisha. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and just have, just a really great conversation with you today, for sure.
I'm so excited to have you here, Crystal, and I was so happy to meet you. I actually met you through a fellow woman in business who's breaking barriers. She and I were on a panel talking about women in STEM, and we were at Howard University. And she said, "Do you know Crystal? You have to know Crystal." And I said, "Oh my God, I don't know Crystal." And as soon as we met, I was like, "Oh my God, I just love her. Like, she is so authentic. She is about her business. She represents." I'm so grateful that you're in this area. And Crystal, you have been in roles, you have been in rooms that many of us have never seen. Many of us really don't know the impact. And so can you describe what it was like working in New York City, at one of the major news platforms, right? As far as booking, can you explain what that was? What was the impact of that? And then we'll kind of talk about how you got there from Baltimore.
Yeah, for sure. So, excuse me. It definitely was a very eye-opening experience. Let me start there. you come from your own world, and depending on what your world is, most of us are products of our experiences or our environments. And so going to the number one cable news network and the number one market in the nation, it was a reality check, right? I was the only Black woman in my newsroom for an entire decade, while I was
Wow.
there full time. And I believe that being in spaces like you mentioned, and it's so powerful where most people won't have access to those spaces, that you just have a higher calling, right? I believe
Mm-hmm.
that you have a purpose on the planet that's way bigger than you. And so going into an industry like media that is very optics, it's very, can be surface, not necessarily getting to know people. It's more transactional. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that it was the best proving ground for Crystal to become Crystal Berger, the founder of EBO, right? I got to see a completely different side of the world where, the elite lived, they made decisions for the world. And they ultimately impact every single thing that we see on television every single day, right?
So
You
wealth
know,
matters.
Oh, all day. I mean, it's the power that drives the U.S. systems, and so being able to be in those spaces and understand that the media is the thing that controls the minds of the masses. And I get that quote from Malcolm X, right? I shortened it, but it really does have the power to influence every single thing that we do. And just
Mm-hmm.
for an example, you asked what was it like being in that space. We used to have editorial meetings every single day at 8:05 a.m. ET. And what we would do in these editorial meetings is we would pitch what stories we believed should be the stories that we told to the world. And there was someone within that space that made an executive decision to say, no, we're not sharing that story. We're not going to do that story. We're going to do this story. We're going to do this story for the next 2 days, 3 hours, 5 minutes, one, 30-second slot. That was how powerful it was because,
Wow.
one thing that I always like to tell people is that the news media is not meant to educate you. It's meant to inform you.
Mm.
You can't get educated from a 30-second soundbite or a 1 minute segment. You have to understand that it's foundationally up to the consumer to take that information and educate themselves so they can make the best and most informed decision. So I just believe that being in that space just taught me so much about how people think, how people operate, what the world systems really are, and also being in position to be able to bring more diverse perspectives to that actual space and influence it. It was more powerful than I could have ever dreamed of.
That's amazing. And the experience that you had is similar to a character I was reading about in Jane Allen's, and that's Jayne, Jane Allen's trilogy of books. And it starts with Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, but then it ends with Black Girls Must Have It All. And the central character was working in media, and she was pitching stories, and it was very clear about the stressors and the microaggressions that happen in that newsroom, as well as how promotions occurred, right? But fortunately, this particular character had an ally, another female producer that was helping her make moves. So, considering that you were in a space where you probably were the only one that looked like you in that back newsroom, right? Did you have an ally, or how did you find your way to success in that particular role, understanding that the numbers, the odds were against you?
Well, for me, I'll say this. Numbers and odds never came into my mind.
Okay.
They never came into my mind, even though I was the only Black woman in my newsroom. I come from a space and a belief system and a foundation that what is for me, no one can keep from me.
Love it.
Right. And my foundational roots in my family taught me that there is only one Crystal Berger, right?
Mhm.
And for people to know Crystal is to love Crystal, but also to actually benefit from her presence, right? And I don't say that from an ego standpoint, but I say that from a Black girl from West Baltimore perspective who is supposed to be a statistic. You
Mm.
know, understanding that wherever I go, it's my space and it's up to
Yes.
me to dominate. And having that perspective really protected and shielded me, because in my particular division, I was the only Black woman in my division. And then there was another, and this is at a massive network with thousands and thousands of employees. There was another Black girl who was in another daytime show division. Her experience was completely different than mine, because
Wow.
she let that space dictate how she was going to show up.
Oh.